Rain hammered the sidewalk as a man in a torn brown jacket hurried toward a city bus stop with his 8-year-old daughter clinging to his hand. "Dad, the bus is leaving. I see it." He broke into a run. The bus doors folded shut. The driver looked straight at them, then pulled away. The little girl stared after the red taillights until they disappeared into the rain. Her shoulders dropped. "It's okay," her father whispered, forcing a smile. "We'll catch the next one." She nodded, pretending to believe him. Then something caught his eye. A black leather wallet lay beside the bench, soaked but untouched. He looked around. The sidewalk was merely empty. No one seemed to notice. His daughter pointed. Someone dropped it. He bent down and picked it up. It felt heavy, very heavy. When he opened it, neat stacks of $100 bills filled one side. His breathing stopped. There had to be several $1,000s inside. His daughter looked at him with wide eyes. "Is that a lot of money?" He swallowed hard. "Yeah." She stared at his face. Then she asked the question that would change everything. "Are we supposed to keep it?" The rain kept falling. Cars splashed through puddles. No one was watching. No one would ever know, except the little girl standing beside him, and himself. 3 months earlier, Daniel Carter still believed things would get better. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't careless. He had spent nearly 15 years repairing heating and cooling systems across Cleveland. People trusted him. Neighbors called him first whenever something stopped working. He fixed furnaces in winter, air conditioners in summer. He never imagined one company closing its doors could erase almost everything he had built. When the owner retired unexpectedly, every employee lost their job. Daniel thought he'd find another one within weeks. Weeks became months. Savings disappeared. Bills piled up. His apartment became impossible to afford. Then came the eviction notice. His wife, Melissa, tried to stay hopeful at first. But hope can wear thin when every conversation ends with another unpaid bill. Arguments started quietly. Then they became louder. One evening, she packed 2 suitcases. "I can't do this anymore." Daniel stood frozen. "What are you saying?" "I need stability. So do Emma." Melissa looked toward the bedroom where their daughter was coloring on the floor. Tears filled her eyes. "I love her. I know. But I can't keep drowning." She kissed Emma goodbye, promising she'd come back soon. Weeks passed. The promise never did. Daniel never spoke badly about her. Not once. Whenever Emma asked where Mom was, he answered the same way. "She's trying to figure some things out." Emma always nodded. She wanted to believe that. So did he. They had spent the last 6 weeks moving from one shelter to another. Daniel hated every minute of it. Not because of himself, because of Emma. She deserved birthday parties, warm bedrooms, clean closets full of clothes. Instead, she kept her favorite stuffed rabbit inside a backpack because it was the only place she knew it wouldn't get lost. Still, she smiled more than most adults. Every morning she made their tiny shelter bed. Every night she whispered, "Tomorrow will be better." Daniel wondered if she believed it, or if she was trying to convince him. That afternoon they were headed to the public library. Not for books, for electricity. Emma needed to finish a school project on one of the free computers. Daniel also knew the library stayed warm until closing time. He checked the time. 45 minutes until the next bus. He looked down at the wallet again. His stomach tightened. Thousands of dollars. Enough for a motel. Enough for food. Enough for new shoes for Emma. He opened the driver's license. The owner was a man named Richard Lawson, age 62, an address across town, several credit cards, business cards, family photos. One picture showed Richard standing beside a teenage boy wearing a baseball uniform. Another showed an older woman smiling with her arm around him. Emma looked at the photographs. He has a family too. Daniel quietly closed the wallet. Yeah, What if he's scared? Daniel didn't answer, because if he kept the money, someone else would wake up terrified. The library finally opened. Daniel asked the woman at the front desk if anyone had reported a lost wallet. She checked a phone log. No. He thanked her. Emma disappeared toward the children's computers. Daniel sat in a corner chair. The wallet rested in his lap like it weighed 100 pounds. His phone buzzed. The screen showed another overdue payment reminder. He deleted it. A few minutes later, another message appeared. His shelter reservation had expired. There were no guaranteed beds available that night. First come, first served. He rubbed his eyes. For one dangerous moment, he imagined taking just enough cash to survive. No one would count it. No one would know. The thought stayed with him longer than he wanted. Then Emma walked over carrying 2 coloring pages. I made one for you. He unfolded the paper. A crooked drawing showed the 2 of them holding hands beneath a giant yellow sun. Across the top, she had written in careful letters, "My dad always does the right thing." Daniel stared at the page. His chest tightened. He folded it carefully and slipped it into his jacket beside the wallet. I love it. She smiled. I know. By late afternoon, they took 2 buses across the city. Richard Lawson's neighborhood looked completely different from where they slept. Large brick homes, fresh-cut lawns, kids riding bicycles without worrying where they'd sleep that night. Daniel stopped outside the address listed on the license. A moving truck sat in the driveway. Several people carried boxes toward the house. A woman wiped tears from her face. Emma whispered, "Maybe they're moving." Daniel wasn't so sure. Everyone looked too sad. Before he could knock, 2 men in dark suits stepped outside. One spoke quietly into a phone. The woman buried her face in a tissue. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. Daniel looked down at the wallet again. He had come expecting a simple thank you. Instead, it looked like he had arrived on the worst day of someone else's life. And he had no idea that the choice he was about to make would soon tie his family's future to theirs, in a way neither family could have imagined. Daniel stood at the edge of the driveway, the wallet hidden inside his jacket. For a moment, he wondered if he should come back another day. The people around the house were carrying boxes, but no one spoke above a whisper. Even the children stayed close to their parents. Emma tugged gently on his sleeve. "Dad?" He looked down. "Yeah? Maybe they need it now." He took a slow breath and nodded. "Let's go." They walked toward the front porch. A gray-haired man wearing work gloves noticed them first. His eyes drifted to Daniel's worn clothes and Emma's faded backpack. "Can I help you?" Daniel pulled out the wallet. "I'm looking for Richard Lawson." The man's expression changed instantly. "Where did you get that?" "I found it near a bus stop this morning." The man didn't answer. Instead, he hurried inside. A few seconds later, a woman in her late 50s stepped onto the porch. Her face was pale, and her eyes were swollen from crying. She froze when she saw the wallet. "Oh," her voice cracked. "Oh, thank God." She stepped forward with both hands shaking. "That's my husband's." Daniel handed it to her. She opened it immediately. The cash was still there. Every card, every photograph. Nothing was missing. She looked up at him in disbelief. You didn't take anything." Daniel simply shook his head. "It wasn't ours." The woman pressed the wallet against her chest. "You have no idea what this means." Before Daniel could answer, a deep voice came from inside the house. "Karen?" An older man slowly walked into the hallway. His right arm rested in a sling. There was a bruise across one side of his face. He moved carefully, like every step hurt. Karen hurried to him. "Richard!" She placed the wallet into his hands. His eyes widened. "I thought it was gone." He looked at Daniel. "You found this?" "Yes, sir." Richard opened the wallet. Nothing had been touched. He looked from the money to Daniel, then to Emma. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, Richard asked quietly, Would you come inside for a minute? Daniel hesitated. We don't want to bother your family. You wouldn't be. There was something in Richard's voice that made it impossible to refuse. The living room was filled with half-packed boxes. Family photographs had already been taken off the walls, leaving lighter squares of paint behind. Emma sat quietly beside Daniel on the couch, while Karen brought them each a glass of water. Richard lowered himself into a chair across from them. I lost this wallet at the hospital parking garage. Daniel frowned. Hospital? Richard nodded. My son. His voice almost disappeared. He was hit by a drunk driver 3 nights ago. Silence filled the room. Karen looked toward the hallway before speaking. He's still unconscious. Emma looked down at her shoes. I'm sorry. Thank you, sweetheart. Richard rubbed his forehead. I didn't even realize my wallet was gone until this morning. He looked down at it. Insurance cards, IDs, everything I needed was inside. Daniel nodded. I'm glad we found it. Richard studied him for a moment. You say we. Daniel smiled at Emma. She spotted it first. Richard looked at her. And what did you tell your dad? Emma answered honestly. I asked if we were supposed to keep it. Karen smiled softly. And? Emma looked at Daniel. He always says if something belongs to somebody else, we should help it get home. Daniel felt his face warm. Richard leaned back without saying anything. His eyes lingered on Daniel's worn boots. The knees of his jeans were torn. Emma's backpack had been stitched together with blue thread. None of it matched the man sitting in front of him. There was pride there. Quiet pride. Richard suddenly asked, What do you do for work? I used to repair heating and air systems. Used to? The company closed. How long ago? Almost a year. Richard nodded slowly. And now? Daniel forced a smile. I pick up whatever jobs I can. He didn't mention sleeping in shelters. He didn't mention skipped meals. He didn't mention pretending he wasn't hungry so Emma could eat. Richard seemed to notice anyway. You have somewhere to stay tonight? Daniel hesitated just long enough. We're figuring it out. Richard didn't press him. Instead, he reached into the wallet and pulled out several $100 bills. Please. Daniel immediately shook his head. I can't. You found thousands of dollars. I know. You could have disappeared. I know. Richard held the money toward him again. This isn't a reward. It feels like one. It's gratitude. Daniel smiled politely. I'm grateful your wallet made it back. He gently pushed Richard's hand away. The room fell silent. Karen looked at her husband. She had never seen anyone refuse money when they so clearly needed it. Emma quietly whispered, Dad? He looked at her. She smiled. You did the right thing. When Daniel and Emma finally stood to leave, Karen disappeared into the kitchen. She returned with 2 paper bags. I made too much soup. Daniel looked inside. There was soup, fresh bread, apples, granola bars, more food than they had seen in days. We can't take this. Karen smiled. Then you'll hurt my feelings. Emma looked hopefully at her father. He finally nodded. Thank you. Karen crouched beside Emma. You remind me of my granddaughter. Emma smiled. I've never had a grandma close by. Karen's eyes filled again. You would have been welcome here any time. Neither of them realized how much those words would matter later. Outside, evening had settled over the neighborhood. The air had turned cooler. Daniel and Emma walked toward the bus stop, carrying the paper bags. Emma looked up. Do you think Richard's son will wake up? Daniel looked back at the house. I hope so. So do I. They sat quietly on the bench. The smell of warm soup drifted from the bag. For the first time that week, Daniel felt like they might eat until they were full. His phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't another bill collector. It was an unknown number. Mr. Carter? Yes. This is Lisa from Westside Mechanical. Daniel frowned. I filled out an application there months ago. I know. We've had an opening. His heart skipped. "We'd like to interview you tomorrow morning." Daniel closed his eyes for a second. "Tomorrow? 9 o'clock. I'll be there." After the call ended, Emma bounced on the bench. "Was that a job?" He smiled. "It might be." She wrapped her arms around him. "I told you tomorrow would be better." For the first time in weeks, he almost believed her. The next morning, Daniel borrowed a clean shirt from the shelter's donation closet. It was a little too big. The sleeves hung past his wrists. Emma straightened the collar. "There. How do I look?" "Like somebody who's getting hired." He laughed. "I hope the manager agrees." They reached the office 10 minutes early. The interview lasted nearly an hour. Daniel answered every question honestly. When they asked why he had been unemployed so long, he didn't make excuses. He simply told the truth. Business closed. Jobs were scarce. He kept trying. The manager thanked him and promised to call. As Daniel walked out, he couldn't read the man's expression. It could have gone either way. Late that afternoon, Daniel and Emma returned to the public library. Emma worked on her homework, while Daniel searched job listings. Most required experience he already had. Many required addresses he no longer did. He sighed. Then someone cleared their throat behind him. A woman in a navy blazer smiled politely. "Daniel Carter?" "Yes." "My name is Rebecca Lawson." The last name caught his attention. She looked to be in her early 30s, professional, calm, but her eyes looked exhausted. "I believe you met my parents yesterday." Daniel slowly stood. "Richard's daughter?" She nodded. "I've been looking for you all morning." Daniel exchanged a puzzled glance with Emma. Rebecca held a folded envelope in her hands. "My father asked me to find you." Daniel glanced at the envelope, but didn't reach for it. "I already told him I can't accept money." Rebecca smiled faintly. "It isn't money." "What is it?" She looked at him for a long moment before answering. "My father remembered something after you left." Daniel frowned. "What?" Rebecca took a slow breath. "He said the moment he heard your name, it felt familiar." She looked directly into his eyes. "He believes the two of you may have met once before." Daniel searched his memory. Nothing came. Rebecca's voice dropped almost to a whisper. "And if he's right, then finding that wallet wasn't the first time your lives crossed." Daniel felt a chill run through him, because the look on Rebecca's face told him one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever Richard had remembered, it was about to change both families forever. Rebecca held the envelope in both hands, but she didn't offer it right away. "My father asked me not to explain everything here." Daniel frowned. "Why?" "He wants to tell you himself." She glanced at Emma, who was quietly reading nearby. "He said it deserves to be said face to face." Daniel looked at the envelope again. "Is everything okay?" Rebecca nodded. "It will be." She smiled gently. "Can you come to the hospital with me?" Daniel hesitated. He had no reason to refuse. "All right." The hospital room was quiet except for the steady rhythm of a heart monitor. Richard sat beside his son's bed. The young man hadn't moved. His eyes stayed closed. Karen stood by the window, holding a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. When Daniel and Emma walked in, Richard slowly stood. "I'm glad you came." Daniel nodded. "You said you remembered something." Richard looked toward the bed before speaking. "It took me all night. I kept hearing your name." He walked over to the small table beside the window and picked up an old newspaper clipping. The edges were yellow. The paper had been folded so many times it was beginning to tear. He handed it to Daniel. At the top was a headline from almost 12 years earlier. "Local technician saves family from apartment fire." Below the headline was a small photograph. Daniel stared at it. His younger self stood beside a burned apartment building, wearing a work uniform covered in soot. His eyes widened. "I remember this." Richard nodded. "I was there." Daniel looked up. "You were?" "My wife and I lived across the street." Daniel searched his memory. I don't remember seeing you. You wouldn't. Richard looked toward his unconscious son. You were too busy carrying people out. Memories rushed back. Smoke, sirens, children crying, a woman screaming from a second-floor window. He remembered climbing a fire escape before firefighters could reach it. He remembered carrying an elderly man outside. He remembered going back in again. Then everything blurred together. Richard's voice became quiet. My son was one of those children. Daniel slowly turned toward the hospital bed. Richard continued, You carried him outside. Karen wiped away a tear. The paramedic said, Another minute. Her voice broke. Another minute and we would have lost him. Daniel couldn't find the words. I never knew. Of course you didn't, Richard said. You disappeared before anyone could thank you. Daniel looked down. I had another service call that afternoon. Richard laughed softly through his tears. You saved my son's life, then went back to work. The room fell silent. Emma looked at her father with wide eyes. You never told me. Daniel shrugged gently. It happened a long time ago. You were a hero. He smiled at her. Richard reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I own Westside Mechanical. Daniel blinked. The company YID that interviewed you yesterday? Daniel stared at him. You own it. Richard nodded. I retired last year. My daughter runs it now. Rebecca smiled. We reviewed your interview before Dad remembered your name. Daniel looked from one face to another. I don't understand. Rebecca laughed softly. The manager called me this morning. He said you were the best applicant he'd interviewed in months. Daniel felt his heart race. Richard continued, You already earned the job. No favors, no special treatment. You got hired before I remembered who you were. Daniel let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he was holding. So, Rebecca smiled, if you still want it, the position is yours. Emma grabbed her father's hand so tightly it almost hurt. He looked at her. So, we don't have to leave the shelter? Before he could answer, his own eyes filled with tears. I don't think we do. Life didn't change overnight. It changed one careful step at a time. Daniel started work the following Monday. The first paycheck covered a small apartment. Not a fancy one, but it had 2 bedrooms. Emma chose the smaller room because she said the sunlight looked prettier there. The first night they slept inside their new home, Daniel woke up before dawn. Not because of noise, not because someone was walking through a shelter, because it was completely quiet. He sat in the living room for several minutes, simply listening to the silence. Emma wandered out, wrapped in a blanket. Couldn't sleep? He smiled. I'm getting used to having a home again. She leaned against him. So am I. Over the next few weeks, Daniel visited the hospital after work. Richard's son, Tyler, remained unconscious. Other days, they didn't. Daniel never knew what to say, so he usually sat for a few minutes, spoke quietly about work, and left. One evening, Emma placed a folded drawing beside Tyler's bed. It showed a baseball field beneath a bright blue sky. Across the top, she had written, We're saving your seat. Karen found the picture later that night. She taped it beside the hospital window. None of them expected what happened the next morning. A nurse rushed into Richard's room. He's awake. Karen dropped her coffee. Richard nearly stumbled trying to reach his son's bedside. Tyler's eyes were barely open. His voice was weak. The first thing he whispered was, Mom? Karen burst into tears. I'm here. The doctor smiled. It's a good sign. Richard turned toward the hallway. Daniel and Emma had just stepped off the elevator, carrying fresh muffins. Without saying a word, Richard walked over and hugged Daniel. It wasn't a polite handshake. It was the hug of a father who had almost lost his child twice. Once in a fire, once on a rainy highway. Months passed. Tyler recovered slowly. Physical therapy replaced hospital rooms. Baseball practices became short walks around the neighborhood. Every small victory felt enormous. One Saturday afternoon, Richard invited Daniel and Emma to a backyard cookout. Nothing fancy, just hamburgers, kids laughing, music playing softly through an old speaker. Emma chased Tyler's little cousins across the lawn until everyone was out of breath. Karen watched from the porch. "You know," she said quietly, "this yard hasn't sounded like this in a long time." Daniel smiled. "It feels good." Richard handed him a cold lemonade. "I've been thinking." Daniel laughed. "That usually means trouble." Richard grinned. "I was thinking about that wallet." Daniel looked at him. "If you had kept it," Richard nodded, "I would have understood." "I don't think I would have understood myself." Richard looked across the yard. "My father used to tell me something. Character isn't built when life is easy. It's revealed when nobody's watching." Daniel smiled. "I guess Emma was watching." Richard laughed. "Maybe that's even harder." That fall, Emma's school held a Community Appreciation Day. Students were asked to invite someone who had made a difference in their lives. Most children brought teachers. Some invited police officers. Others chose grandparents. When Emma walked onto the stage, she held 2 small certificates. The principal smiled. "Emma, who are these for?" She looked toward the audience. "My dad." Daniel stood as the room applauded. Emma handed him the first certificate. Then she turned toward Richard. "And this one," she smiled, "is for the man who reminded my dad that kindness always comes home." Richard's eyes filled with tears as he accepted it. Not because of money, not because of success, because they understood the story behind those 2 simple pieces of paper. After the ceremony, Daniel and Emma walked home through the same neighborhood where everything had begun. The afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the sidewalk. Near the old bus stop, Emma suddenly stopped walking. "Dad!" He looked down. Another wallet lay beside the bench. She stared at it for one long second. Then she laughed. "What are the chances?" Daniel picked it up. He smiled without opening it. "What do you think we should do?" Emma slipped her hand into his. "We help it get home." He nodded. "That's exactly what we'll do." Together they crossed the street, carrying nothing that belonged to them. Yet somehow they both felt richer than the day before. Because months earlier, on a cold, rainy afternoon, a homeless father had chosen honesty over desperation. He thought he was simply returning a lost wallet. What he never realized was that one quiet decision would restore more than a stranger's property. It would return hope to his own daughter, give another father the chance to thank the man who had once saved his son, reunite 2 families when they needed each other most, and prove that the smallest act of integrity can echo through lives for years. Sometimes, the greatest miracle isn't finding something that's been lost. It's discovering that doing the right thing has a way of leading people back to one another.